All right, I have 6:30. Yeah, let's do it. Are you ready for me to get going? All right. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order. My name is Jack Currier. I serve as the chair of the Nashua Zoning Board. This is a Nashua Zoning Board. The Board of Aldermen are downstairs, although they're not meeting tonight. So before we get going, I'd just like to walk through the rules that we have for our meeting. First, if you have a cell phone, I ask that you either silence it or turn it off. This meeting tonight is recorded in 3 venues. It's recorded on TV. Actually, we're live tonight because there is no Board of Aldermen. And I'll thank, first of all, Scott, who's the man behind the door that you don't see, and he'll be catching all the action. And we're also recorded on an audio tape that you can stream if you want to. Go to NashuaNewHampshire.gov. In a few days, the tape will be up, and you can stream digitally this meeting. And we'll also have written transcripts a few days after that of this meeting. So that's how this meeting is recorded. And that's why I asked if we could have silence in the room except for the person speaking into the microphone. And so what I'm going to be asking for tonight is we'll just have one person speaking at a time and into the microphone, and that way it'll be clear. And let me ask, can everybody in the audience hear me okay? If not, okay, great. I'm not seeing anybody who's not able to hear me. So our agenda tonight, a copy of our agenda is on the table in that corner. If you don't have a copy of the agenda, please feel free to get up and get it so you can see where you are. We're going to be walking through these cases, 5 cases we have tonight, and we'll be ticking through them from case 1 to case 5. So a couple of points about what we're here for tonight. We have requests for variances and requests for special exceptions before us tonight. And what that is this is the big book of Nashua Code, zoning code, and variances are requests to deviate from the code, and a special exception is slightly different. It is a use that is permitted as long as certain conditions are met. So it's also a deviation, but the bar is a little lower for a special exception versus a variance. So first, for the variance, by state law, actually, before I go any further, let me introduce the rest of the board. To my right is Mary Ellen McKay, who's our clerk. Going around the table is J.P. Boucher, who's our vice chair. And we have Rob Shaw, who's a full member, and Ms. Kathy Vitale, who's an alternate member. All 5 of us, we believe, will be voting on each case tonight. To my left, to your right, is Mr. Carter Falk. He is the Deputy Planning Manager at the in City Hall here. So our roles tonight, we are volunteers. We're appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the Board of Aldermen. We're lay people. We're not attorneys per se. We are all residents of Nashua and have just had an interest in serving the city. And for whatever reason, we've ended up on this board. And we only meet every other week. We don't meet in between or discuss the cases. So what we have tonight are 5 independent opinions coming tonight. And per state law, each variance or special exception tonight would need 3 or more affirmative votes to grant the variance or special exception. So 3, 4, or 5 affirmative votes for the variance or special exception, it'll pass. 2 or less, it will not. So the 5 criteria by state law for a variance, I'll read briefly those. The 5 criteria is 1, that the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. Number 2, that the spirit of the ordinance is observed. Number 3 of 5 is that substantial justice would be served by the variance. And number 4 is that the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. And the 5th is that literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. So that's the 5 criteria that 3 or 4 members would need to find in each request tonight for a variance to be approved. A special exception, and we have one of those before us tonight, is one that it must be listed in the use of table of exceptions, special exceptions in this book, and it is. Number 2 is that the requested use or activity will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety. Number 3 is the requested use will not overload any public water drainage or sewer system or other municipal system. And number 4, and again I'm reading for the requirements for a special exception, is that any special exception regulations for the use activity set forth in other sections of the zoning ordinance are fulfilled. And number 5 is that the requested use will not impair the integrity or be out of character with the district or immediate neighborhoods. So those are the 5 criteria for a special exception. So our meeting tonight, each of the 5 cases tonight is really 2 components to that. The first component is the public hearing. The public hearing is where we, this board here, hears from you, the public, and that will go in the specific order that I'll go through right here. First, the applicant will speak first. The applicant will have up to 15 minutes to make their case. We actually have a clock to keep an eye on that. That clock will be green for the first 14 minutes. It'll be yellow from minute 14 to 15. It'll turn red when it ticks up to 15 minutes. After the applicant has spoken, anybody else who is in favor of the application will have up to 5 minutes to present their testimony. After everyone has spoken in favor of the request, then anyone with questions, concerns, or opposition will have up to 5 minutes at the microphone to present their case. So any questions, concerns, or opposition will all come to us after the testimony in favor of it. After all the opposition is heard, then the applicant will have 5 minutes back at the mic to address the opposition. And then after the applicant has spoken, one and only one person who has spoken in opposition will have a final 5 minutes to address what the applicant has said. And at that point, the public hearing will end, and the public meeting will begin. And the public meeting is where the 5 of us will deliberate here in front of you and likely come to a decision, or I should say will likely come to a vote, and we'll see what the decision or how that falls depending on the votes. So again, public hearing, public meeting, and I guess just going to tick through to make sure. The other point I wanted to say is that whatever decision we come to tonight, there's a 30-day window of appeal. So for example, if we approve a request, there's a 30-day window of appeal that any aggrieved party has the right to provide to us a request to rehear the case. In other words, if you think we got it wrong, you have up to 30 days to make a request for a rehearing. If you were interested in doing that, you could give Mr. Falk a call tomorrow or whenever, but the 30 days is an important window. And it's also important because if we receive a rehearing request and we decide to rehear the case, that would happen within 30 days. If we decide to rehear the case, whatever decision we made will be stayed. In other words, if we gave an approval and someone gave a request and we believed, or the majority of us believed we needed to do it again, maybe we got it wrong or whatever, that approval would be stayed and it would start from the beginning. We'd rehear the case again. And then one other thing, if there is a rehearing request that we don't decide to rehear, or if there's still an aggrieved party, the next step would be for you to file a suit in Hillsborough County Superior Court. So with that, I'll just take a look. Were there any questions, anything you think I missed on that? Mr. Schultz.
Comment about cell phones and conversations?
Yes, again, if you have, I know some folks walked in late, if you have a cell phone, please silence it or turn it off. And one other point is if you want to have a conversation, if your case is not being heard, because obviously we're only hearing one case at a time, please feel free to step out in the hall, and when the door is shut behind you, you could have your conversation. But while in here, we ask for silence so that the microphones only pick up the relevant conversation and we're not disturbed. Does anyone in the audience have any questions before we get going? If anybody has a question, now's the time to ask us. If not, I think we're ready to get going. And I'd like to open the public hearing on case number 1. And thank you. Case number 1, the owner is Laura and Paul Wozniak. The address is 61 McKean Street. It's in the RB zone. And the request is the following variances: to encroach 2 feet into the 6-foot required left side yard setback and to encroach 5 feet into the 6-foot required rear yard setback to replace a previously existing 10 by 13-foot shed with a new 12 by 14-foot shed. Hi, if you could, before you get going, and this applies to everyone, if you could give your name and address for the record.
My name is Paul Wozniak, and I live at 61 McKean Street in Nashville.
Hi, welcome. If you'd like to walk us through your application for the replacement shed.
But you already read what I wanted to do. When I've lived in the house for 25 years, and there's been a shed there the whole 25 years. I've replaced them and replaced them with older, with metal sheds.
If I could just interrupt for a second, you're kind of a tall guy. Could you just lift that up a little bit? It should stay up. Yeah, there you go. I think that's fine. It'll pick you up. Thank you.
So what I did was I bought a Reed's Ferry shed, had that put in. When I bought the Reed's Ferry shed, they didn't say anything about getting a permit for it. And I had no idea because I replaced the other ones with no problem at all. And I know that I have one landowner behind me who does not live on that property but owns it, is the only one that's having a problem with the shed. So I was asked for the variance to keep it there because there's been number one for 25 years.
Okay. A couple of things. Let me just start with a few questions. Again, there's the 5 points of law that we look for, and the first one is that granting a requested variance will not be contrary to public interest. And just to clarify what your testimony is, you've had a shed there for many years, and so that this replacement one, you're saying, is really substantially the same as it has been for a long time.
Yes. Oh, it's better.
Better looking, okay. All right. And then just a point on the proposed use will not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, what you have here is that you're saying your existing shed was old and rusted, and this new one is better looking, and you feel
It's
that
a Reed's Ferry shed, 30-year warranty, vinyl siding. It's a beautiful shed. It matches my house.
Okay.
It's just like it.
All right, well, let's see if anyone has any questions for you. Mr. Boucher?
So in your estimation, when you replace this shed, the footprint of the shed, do you think you encroached more towards your property lines, or is the shed more into the yard now because it's just a little bit
The
bigger?
shed's more into my yard now.
All right, so basically, if I understand correctly, when you replace the shed, the distance between both property lines did not decrease.
On the east side, it stayed the same. On the south side, I brought it in so that they had to bring it in so they could walk back there. So it's in further than what it was. The metal shed was probably 8 inches off of that fence.
Okay, so you've actually increased the distance between the
Yes,
fence
sir.
and what the metal shed was?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
I think Ms. McKay has a question for you.
Yeah, that was basically my question. Is it the same size? Is it larger, taller, wider?
No. It's 2 feet wider and 1 foot longer.
Okay.
You all said. No, about the height. What was the height of the old one and the height of this one?
The other one was 10, and I believe the inside of this one is like 10.5.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Wozniak? We don't have any other questions, so I think we're all set. You could have a seat. We'll see what comes up. Was there anybody else who'd like to speak and testify in favor of the shed? Favor? Sure. Come on up, sir. If you could give us your name and address for the record.
Yeah, my name is Tony Truex. This is my wife Kelly. We
And
live
could
at
I
60
trouble you to spell that just so we get Truex? Is that Truex?
TIUAX.
AX, all right, thank you. And your address again? I'm
We
sorry.
reside at 62 McKean Street.
62.
We have butters to the property. We live directly across the street. I want to make just a brief statement to the effect that we have no opposition at all to the location of the shed and would hope that the board would find in favor of the applicant.
All right, any questions for Mr. Truex? All right, simple enough. Thanks for your testimony. Was there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor? We have another hand here. Hi, come on up if you could give us your name and address, and if the last name spelling isn't obvious, you could spell it for us so we get it right. Thanks.
My name's Derek Stevens, live at 63 McKean Street, I guess to the left side of the shed. As far as we look at is, it doesn't change how the other shed was, we have a fence in between anyway, so we never really saw the other shed, and we still don't see this one, so I'm in favor.
All right, thanks. Any questions for Mr. Stevens? No, we're all set, thanks. Anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of the proposed shed replacement at 61 Keene Street? Anyone with questions, concerns, or opposition? Hi, ma'am, if you'd like to come up and give us your name and address and let us know what's on your mind.
I'm Bonnie Drowns. I reside at 4 Sand Street. I'm the property owner of 9 Sand Street. So one thing I think about when you apply for a permit is that's when you ask for the variance. So the permit was never applied for, so the variance was never applied for. When we noticed that Mr. Wojciechowicz, or I'm sorry if I get your name wrong, was taking his shed down, my husband went over and informed him that the fence line that his property is directly against, which I will show you, was not on our property line. We believe it's like a foot over. We don't know the shed was there first or the fence was there first because we've only owned the property a few years. We asked him to see the property bound on his line so we could make sure, connected to the one on McKean Street, that we can see clearly, and he wouldn't allow us to do that. So my husband informed him of the 6-foot setback that's required, and my husband agreed with him if he would move it 3 feet back from the property line, not the fence line, which is not on our property. He agreed to do that. When the shed was delivered and we came home, there was a shed on the same line, a foot back, which I still believe is on our property line. We came to City Hall and we filed a complaint, like you're supposed to do. When he got that notification, he came to my home and he banged, banged, banged on the door and came in a very threatening manner to me, wanted to see my husband, who was not home at the time. I explained that to him and I asked him to leave. My husband came home like 15 minutes later, didn't even get into the house, and he was over there reading him the riot act about what business it was of ours, and to not step foot on his property to look for that boundary, which is all we really wanted to do. We probably wouldn't even be here today if we could clearly mark all 4 corners of our boundary. The fence in question is clearly ours. And when my husband, actually before my husband even said that, he threatened us that if we touched that fence, he would kick his ass. So, we're here today because he wouldn't cooperate with us. He had 3 choices: get a permit, get a variance, and take the 3-foot variance that my husband was willing to give him. He didn't want to do that. He put the shed where he wanted to. So I'd like to, if I could approach and show you some aerial photos.
Sure, if you'd like to hand those to Ms. Vitale.
So that's 100-foot. We own
If
both
you
pieces
could,
of
maybe you could
property.
just pass those out and then
Yeah, I
walk us
have a
through.
few. I didn't make enough for all of you, but
You
the
just-
aerial
Hold
clearly
on, let's get
shows
those.
that that shed is on the fence line.
Yeah, go ahead, I'll pass these
And the
around.
fence line is not on the property.
Maybe we'll just, I think we'll just need one over
The
here.
variance, he's already on our property.
Oh,
I think they're actually different, slightly
yeah,
different.
there's one different.
Yeah, check. Is that the same as
One
that
of those
one?
small ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, these are the same.
So that'll be enough for this side.
That's the
All right, so we're looking at the photographs here, and I think what you are saying is this red line is what you believe to be the property line?
From what I did from Google Earth, yep. I measured from what, I think in there is your city plot lines.
If you could stay close to the mic, because otherwise. we
Your
won't get-
city plot lines are in there, and I measured accordingly,
Okay.
the 50-foot and the 124 feet.
All right, so I guess I have a question. Do you have a certified plot plan for your lot?
Just what the city gave us.
Oh, okay, what was that, the Google Maps?
No, it's in there somewhere. Yeah, right there.
The
That's what we get when we came down.
That's just the GIS.
Okay.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Take a look at that over here. Go ahead.
Can we ask Mr. Falk to comment on GIS and how accurate that is with what we see, because obviously that shows something different?
The GIS maps are fairly accurate, but you can't go with those for actual surveyed information. They may be based on deed information, but we have a disclaimer on there that they're not exactly 100% accurate. They're probably about as close as you can, but you know, we're not gonna, if it's a survey signed and stamped, sealed by a surveyor, you know, that's what we would consider 100% accurate. But those wouldn't necessarily be. As far as the sheds are, it's a setback to the property line. They're not based on a fence line, but, we assumed that when the applicant submitted his plan, that it's accurate, that, he based on the property line, so.
He didn't submit a plan. He didn't get a permit.
Well, he didn't. get a
After the
permit.
fact.
Yeah.
After the fact.
He submitted a variance application. He cannot get a permit until the variance is approved, should it be approved.
So a couple things. The reason I was asking about a certified plot plan is because that is the gold standard. That is stamped and signed off. And if anyone were to believe, their property line is a little bit this way or a little bit that way, or hey, that fence that went up is really on my property line, the certified plot plan, in my mind, that's a requirement. Otherwise, the GIS is not something that we can rely on to say that's right or that's wrong. And I guess this is just my advice. I mean, I had this same situation with my abutter. All of a sudden, it became unclear when a house got developed down the street and you start measuring back. Our property line was like 10 feet in question. I had to hire a surveyor, and it ended all questions. And I guess what I'm saying is, at least for me where I'm at, and I don't know about the others, is I'm relying on the applicant to be, and that information to be true. If a certified plot plan is to say that's untrue, then that changes everything, because that is the standard. And of course, a certified plot plan is signed off, by a licensed surveyor. But that's just a comment what I have on this, and I guess I've spoken enough. I didn't know if anybody else had any questions for, and I could you spell your last name? Was it Seams?
Drowns.
Drowns. Thank you, Mrs. Drowns. Were there any questions for Mrs. Drowns? Ms. McKay?
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. Mrs. Drowns, when you purchased your property, I'm assuming the fence was there since we've been told it was there for 25 years anyway. Did you question the property line at that time? I mean, when you went through the mortgage process and you did all that?
No. I don't think the fence was there for 25 years.
And
That fence would be fallen down if it was there for 25 years.
okay,
The previous owner put it up. I tried to get in touch with them and I couldn't, but I know for a fact that they put that up. Because they had a really big garden over there and they were trying to keep intruders out.
and you've lived there how long?
I don't live there. It's a rental property. I live across the street.
Okay.
I live on 4 Sand Street. I live across the street.
And you've lived at 4 Sand Street for,
27 years, maybe, 26, 27 years?
okay, and has the fence been there the entire time?
I don't really know.
Remember, okay,
I don't.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mrs. Drowns?
Actually, it's not Mrs. Drowns, it's Bonnie Drowns. I'm married to Alan LaRoche, but I didn't take his name, so I guess you can call me Mrs. Drowns, but
Sorry
that's not
about
right.
I'm sorry, it was Audrey?
Bonnie.
Bonnie.
Bonnie. All right, Bonnie Drowns, we've got it right now. Any other questions for Ms. Bonnie Drowns? I think we're all set, if you'd like to have a seat. And let me ask if, is anyone else here to speak with opposition, questions, or concerns to the proposed shed at 61 McKean? Mr. Wozniak, so you've heard Ms. Drown's concern. Could you speak to us about the property line? Before you get going, just one other thing. The way we take testimony here is that all testimony is addressed to the board versus to each other. I think it's much friendlier that way. It's much easier to do it. So as you folks are testifying, if you could just direct your questions or concerns to us, and we'll get those answered. So property line.
Excuse me.
Oh,
Also, I think that we just want to reiterate that, that we're here for this particular case, and I think anything surrounding, anything that's happened,
yeah.
it's not really our purview to decide whether it affects it. So any, maybe issues that has happened around this.
Yeah.
Follow what I'm saying?
Well, thanks, and I appreciate you saying that. What we're focused here tonight is the application at hand, the points of law, the facts that go into this. In some of the testimony you've heard, there was some history. While we've heard that, I didn't put a stop to it. I could have a gavel, and as soon as we drift from points of law, stop that. But that doesn't go into our consideration, and we're not looking for that history to be addressed. We are looking for the points of law, and at least for me, at this point, is the boundary line and what information you can share with us on the boundary line and the accuracy of that and the fence, et cetera.
Right. Where my neighbor on the left and their fence is, right inside that fence is the property marker.
Mm-hmm.
And my yard is not exactly square. It's shorter on this end and longer on this end. So when you look at the fence from the street, it looks like it's almost straight, but it does veer out. Now, the property marker is on the inside. So obviously they're saying it's on their property, and that's why we're here today. Had I known, had Reed's Ferry Shed told me that I needed to buy or get the permit, I would have gladly came down and got it, saved myself a whole lot of money, but they didn't. By them putting it up, I figured everything was okay. And then the property line started, and that's where this is all at. That particular fence has not been there for 25 years. It's been replaced 3 times since. Had they not replaced it, I would have, because I have children at the time. So I know the shed's on my property. There was never an issue before about my old rusted out shed that was sitting up against the fence. It only happened when I bought the new one. I don't see there's a problem there.
Well, let me ask you.
And I do have the property line for my property and the surrounding properties. I have the book that shows the city of Nashua, everything, that I borrowed from a friend of mine. And it has all the details, the length, the shape, everything.
That's probably the a print of the GIS as well, what I've seen. So, I'm jumping in here with a question. The 2 feet to the left and 5 feet from the rear, it is your belief that that is accurate to the property line marker that's?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Okay. All right. Ms. McKay has a question for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wozniak, for taking my question. You said the marker, the property line marker was inside the fence. That means it's inside on your property, correct?
Yes, if this was the marker, a pole is here and a
Yeah.
pole is right here. It sits right on the corner.
Okay. Okay, and that fence, while it's not the exact same fence, there has been a fence in existence as far as you can remember, as long as you've owned the property.
Yes.
There's been a fence on that property line.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Boucher has a question for you.
All right, so we got the clarification on the fence. The fence has always been replaced in the exact same position. That's always been in, right? So it's replaced twice
Yes.
since the original. So it's always been replaced, and that was replaced by the previous owner of that property?
Yes,
Okay. And so when you made your application, just again to reiterate, were you taking your measurements off the fence or off what you believe is your property line because you know where the markers are?
off the marker.
Okay, so how much more space from the marker to the fence would you say? Would you estimate your property line is to the fence? Is it 6 inches, a foot, 2 feet? What would you say? Just, and I'm not holding you to it, just kind of a rough idea.
20 inches.
Okay, 20 inches. So in essence, what you're saying is that, for example, off the back of the shed, you have applied for a 1 foot, but visually, if for the untrained eye who didn't know there was a property line there, it would appear that it could be a couple of feet plus
Yes.
behind that shed.
Yes.
All right, okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? I guess I had one more. Did you happen to have a certified plot plan of your lot ever done?
No, I didn't need one.
Yeah,
And
okay,
personally, I don't think that I should go out and get one. I mean, I'm not the one disputing anything.
okay.
You know, if they want to get one and they show me a professional survey that says my shed is on their lot, I'll move it. I'll be more than happy to.
Yeah, all right. I'm all set. Any other questions? All right, you could have a seat.
Thank you.
And Ms. Drowns, would you like to,
I don't think we have to have a professional assessor to come out if he can just show us the property boundaries. And that would end all. We told him that on day one.
mm-hmm,
You know, I do not believe that our fence is on his marker, but I can't believe that because I don't know it's true. He won't show me. That's all it would take, you know? So like I said, I've lived there for many, many years, and I may not have observed that fence or noticed anything, but I think I probably would have observed a fence going up 3 times. I know that family very well, and I don't think they would put up a fence 3 times. They have no children, they had no pets. They put up a fence to keep out people from stealing their vegetables in their very lush garden. It's the only reason there was a fence put up.
all right. Thank you. Any questions? Questions? I think we're all set. You could have a seat. Thank you. So with that, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts on the case? Who would like to jump in first? Mr. Boucher?
Obviously, we have 2 very distinct opinions of what's happening with the property line. So let's just back up a minute and look at what the request is. The request is obviously 1 foot off the rear side, 5 feet encroachment, which would leave technically 1 foot gap between the shed and the property line, and then 2 foot encroachment on the left side, which would leave a 4 foot. So there's an existing shed, so, again, the way I look at it is there's an existing shed there. It appears that, from testimony, regardless of what's, the comments have been made about the property line, that the shed was placed exactly in the same footprint, back left, back rear, so that back corner, let's say, is placed in the same position. So notwithstanding, again, the conversations we have, we replace a shed that's just slightly bigger, just slightly taller by inches by testimony. So on the face of it, that, I would not have an issue with that at all. So now what it comes to is the issue of the property line. I think, again, by testimony, the applicant has stated that I know where my bounds are, and I measure to the bound, and I'm well aware that the fence is not on my property. I don't think he's ever, he did not state that. He's approximating 20 inches. It could be 6 inches, it could be 12 inches, it could be 3 feet. I guess the point is I think that there's a confidence that, pretty stark confidence that it is on the other, that it is away from the property line. But again, his statement was, and I'll take it for the value they're saying, is that I'm 1 foot away from the property marker. So, the question is whether or not there's anything that would be credible enough to not support this application as it stands. Again, this is not a new shed that was placed. This is an existing shed that's been there for a long time by testimony. I don't think anybody's disagreed to that. And it was placed in the same place. I guess I'd like to hear more about, whether or not there's anything credible, anything that would prevent one of us from supporting the application, I guess from my point of view, or from the way I'm looking at it. Again, I think that this is, again, something that may fall in a different arena as far as, what we believe our property line is and not. Like you said, if we had a certified plot plan, that'd be easy. But again, it's not like a shed just got plopped down there that hasn't been there for a long time. And I understand that sometimes there is times where things have been there for a long time and they're not necessarily where they're supposed to be. But I do find credibility in the fact that that there is a very strong belief that shed is on the applicant's property. Is it exactly a foot? That we can't say, but I think it sits there. I believe so right now.
All right, thank you. Ms. Vitale?
I think what I heard the applicant say is that it's actually moved a little bit further away from the fence than it was originally. So it's moved to, they probably measured that, he moved it further away so they had to have access back there where the old fence was closer to the fence. What we're hearing by testimony is a foot off of that boundary marker. As far as like the neighborhood goes, there's other structures that are close to their boundary markers. So the fact that he's asking for this shed to be, to do a variance, it would not be unusual, it wouldn't be out of character for the neighborhood. The neighborhood does have other structures that are close to the boundaries of the properties. It is a small yard, which we usually take a look at, so does he have a feasible way to do it in another way? It's a pretty small yard, he has something in front of it, there's other, things on the property to move it elsewhere wouldn't be logical. I think we probably all agree that putting it in the corner of the yard is the logical space. I would have to say that it's credible that he's used his boundary marker and as far as showing that boundary marker, there's somebody else that's on the other side of the fence that belongs on their property. I don't know if residents, it's a nice thing to do, maybe just point it out, take a picture of it, whatever, so you can see the distance with a ruler down. That would probably prove the point, to be able to show that. But listening to everything, I'm inclined to support the applicant.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I am in general support. I think there's a lot of strength in the fact that this, essentially, the similar situation has occurred for decades. Again, to Ms. Vitale's point, there's a lot of other sheds, garages throughout this neighborhood that are either on the property lines or extremely close to the property lines. We have the testimony that the new shed, which I think is a general improvement, especially based on the historical aspect of rusted metal sheds, et cetera, that I think that there's a overall positive benefit in this latest replacement. But even more notable, I think, is that while not a significant distance, it is, by at least testimony, placed slightly less incurring on those setbacks. Again, I think we're talking about 6-8 inches types of things, a foot maybe, but nonetheless, there's no indication that there's any greater incursion of the replacement shed than what existed there previously. I think that getting down to kind of the inches in terms of the concern here, I'm actually less concerned about than ultimately it's really up to the property owner and the applicant to adhere to whatever variance relief that we provide. He requested this relief of 5 feet into the 6 foot in the back and 2 feet into the side. If we are inclined to approve that, I believe that he requested those because that is what this shed incurs by that the most, so that he would be in compliance as things exist to those values, and it seems that there's a reasonable basis based on the property markers, the boundary markers that are in existence. So it's really, at some point, then comes down to a question of enforcement if there's any ultimate concern. But for us, I think we go by, I'm going by the fact of what testimony's been presented, and by all indications that the relief that's being asked for will be sufficient to have the shed stay in the new location it's in, which is, again, less incurring than the previous shed. So I think with a long history of this and those other reasons, I think that this is something I can support.
Thank you. Ms. McKay?
I concur with my fellow board members. The long-term existence of the fence, the long-term existence of the shed, the complete awareness of the boundary lines, and I understand those markers are placed in property lines back in the day were like pie slices or just whatever, they zigzagged, and I understand fences can appear to be straight, and they're not exactly, because they are meeting that. He was clear in what he's requesting. He was clear in his estimation of how far off the fence line the boundary marker is. He had the information available. I am inclined, and I will support this application.
Thank you. My thoughts on the case, I'm in agreement with what I'm hearing. I guess I wanted to throw out one other point. You know, probably the single largest volume request that we hear is for a shed within the 6 feet to a property line. And Mr. Shaw did touch on that. And so we hear this a lot, but I think this board has been very supportive of it, and you had touched on it, you know, because this is kind of a postage stamp neighborhood where everybody's yard is of a premium value. And when there are sheds, if that 6x6 is held to what I think this board finds is many people, if not everyone, says that that's kind of 6 feet is wasted space, and it pushes the shed out in the yard. And we've granted relief countless times, And so the request before us, which is really a 1-foot encroachment and a 2-foot encroachment, I'm in support of that. Do I have that right?
Yeah, no, it's 5 feet encroachment into the 6-foot rear.
So there's a 1-foot
1 foot is offset.
offset, and the other side is a 4-foot offset. That is enough for a homeowner to perform maintenance, whatever, rake leaves or paint the back of it when it needs to be done. It's problematic when sheds are on the property line, so I'm supportive of it for that situation. In terms of where is the property line, let's just say if Mr. Wozniak's, pin in the ground is, is truly not accurate, and if a survey were to be done and it's a foot or something over, to me, the remedy is pretty simple, that he could move the shed and maintain the same incursion that he's requested now. So while there's a property line dispute that none of us are going to be able to answer, certainly not me, I set that aside and I say, I think the request is reasonable, and should that property pin end up moving one way or the other, the shed can move with it. When it comes down to just the encroachment, I'm favorable to it, and how it plays out in terms of where the true pin is, that the decision we come to tonight, the shed can move with that should it need to. So I'm in support of it. Mr. Boucher, would you like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance for Laura and Paul Wozniak, 61 McKean Street. They are requesting the following variances. 1, to encroach 2 feet into the 6-foot required left side yard setback, and 2, to encroach 5 feet into the 6-foot required rear yard setback to replace a previously existing 10 by 13 shed with a new 12 by 14 shed. This is in the RB zone, code sections 190-31. We find that the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property, and the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than area variance. We discussed in general the fact that we see many of these applications, and again, in consideration of the size of the property, to meet the setback requirements, in most cases, the sheds would almost seem to be in the middle of the yard. So again, we discussed this in length. It is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. It will not adversely affect property values of surrounding parcels. We had no testimony for or against that. It's not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice would be served.
So we have a motion on the table to approve, and that motion is seconded by Mr. Shaw. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I'd just like to just emphasize a couple of the other things again, just that this is also in noting that there has been sheds existing in this similar location for upwards or longer than 25 years, and that the incursion is slightly less than what it historically existed, and that the replacement shed is slightly larger, but not in a significant way, either in height, width, or breadth. So those are also, I think, just things that I'd like to note in our discussion here.
So I think it's safe to add that to the motion, and that'll be how it's recorded on the minutes then. Yep, so the motion is, you might say, amended to include those 3 comments. Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Show of hands in favor of the motion to approve. So that's 5-0, so that's approved. And with that, I'd like to close the public meeting on case number 1.
Excuse me. I mentioned the window of appeal just in case.
Sure, I mean, I'll mention again the window of appeal. There's a 30-day window of appeal, and if we receive an application or a rehearing request, we'll take a look at that and see what we think. But in this case, your shed, I think, is already there, right? So anyway, 30 days will maybe make finality to this decision. We'll see. All right?
She just told me they were gonna tear down the fence. Do I need to get a permit to put one up?
Well,
No.
No?
No.
I can-
Fences don't require building permits as long as they're under 6 feet in height, and there's no setback on fences either.
all right. Have a good night, folks, and closing the case number 1. We good to keep going? All right, let's keep moving right along. We'll open the public hearing on case number 2. Put my glasses on here. The owner is 5 State Service Corporation. The applicant is Rick Guerrero. The address is 39 Crown Street. The request is a special exception to convert an existing 2-family dwelling into a 3-family dwelling. This very same request was previously approved by this board on April 26, 2005, but no action was taken, and the permit has long since lapsed. It's in the General Industrial Zone, Ward 7. Hi, good evening. If you could give us your name and address and walk us through your application.
Hi, how are you? My name is Rick Guerrero. I live in 7 Blackstone Drive, apartment 37. I'm working for 5 State Services Corporation. The owner for the company is my father. He's here. We're working together. We buy the property like 2 months ago. The property, they need renovation. They need dairy, bathroom, kitchen, flooring, normally stuff. It's nothing huge. Well, when we saw the property, we saw the attic. They had stairway from the second floor to the attic. They got a long space, and they're almost ready. I didn't know about the permit in the attic, so when I come into to the office here to get a permit, I find out in 2005 or 2006, the previous owner, they do permit for plumbers, bathrooms, and make it like a big rooms. So it's a huge space, so I think we can do the level 3. There was a student apartment or 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartment in the 3rd floor. I know we need to make for the 3rd floor, we need to make a sprinkler, a special sprinkler, or we can do the second stairway. One in the front, one in the back. I don't know if do you have the picture what I give you?
We have these
Right.
pictures here, yep.
Okay, so if you saw the picture there, you saw the stairway, there's an existing stairway, right? That's from the 2nd to the 3rd floor,
Uh-huh.
right? And from the main entry for the 2nd floor, you can get the second stairway to go to the attic. So they have a emergency stairway in the back, but it's too small. So I need to make it like a bigger, make a better stairway. What else? The bathroom is all ready. I need use of dairy. They got already a plumber. The electrician, I need to do all the electrician because they come in, they stay together on the 2nd floor. So I need to make a separate for the electrician. It's not too much it's not a big changes. It's just couple stairway. I had to do in the front like a small door to get a more room, for making a nice bedroom. And that's it. This is only for the 3rd floor. The 3rd floor, they need to do, cosmetic changes, like a dairy bathroom, flooring, and stuff like that. Actually, outside the house, it's so ugly. They need to change it, siding and everything. They got a lot of patio. It's so big. Parking, they got plenty parking to do. Actually, they got a garage in the back too for 2 cars indoor. And then you can parking easy, 2 or 4 more cars easy to outside to make a room. Pretty much that street, 39 Crown Street. It's like they got like a couple of buildings, a business building or storage or something, and then you got a family house. Actually, on the left side, do you have big house there? There's like, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 apartments in the side. And the front too, you have a couple multifamily. Pretty much everything is 2 and 3 and more. So I would like to get it, third floor. It's almost ready. It's not too, I don't need to do too much to make it a level 3.
All right. Thank you for that. I'll just start off with a question for myself. On July 19th, Mr. Collins had sent you a letter with 7 items.
Yeah.
And so he was pointing out that if this board were inclined to approve 3 units, these 7 steps you'd have to meet,
Yeah.
like one of those, sprinkler, et cetera. And so are you aware of this, that if,
I know, yeah, I saw the letter there, and for the sprinkler, if I had to do the second the second stairway, I don't have to do the sprinkler. Because I
see.
have the front and I have in the back.
okay,
So that's the way. To do the dorm, I already have an architect, to make a small blueprint.
okay,
And schedule everything inside. I hire a company to do,
Yeah.
carpenter company, professional guy,
yeah,
to do that. Working construction, but it's not on my part. For big carpenter, open the roof a little bit or something, I
Yeah.
have to hire a company for.
okay. All right. Are there any questions anyone has for Mr. Guerrero? I guess I had just one other question. How many, you were saying about parking, there's plenty of parking. When I'd actually remember seeing this many years ago, in '05, I've been sitting on this board that long, it's kind of scary how time flies. But, there were some cars parked beside the house, and they
Yeah.
were actually like sticking out in the street. In fact, one of the pictures, ironically, in this application, a couple of cars, let me just pull up that.
That's why I
picture.
want to do like a new fence all the way around. Yeah, that's why I want to do a fence all the way around, just to make it, because the owner before, they don't make a rulers to the to the tenant. They parking everywhere and everything. Actually, when I buy the house, I had to junk 2 cars from there. Because people just park in the side. We live in, we got 2 streets. In the front is Crown Street, and then have another on the side. I don't remember the name for another side, but people just parking there, don't say nothing and anything like that. They own it before. I just give a letter to the people who are renting there, move everybody, take all the car out, and I want to put a fence in the side and the front. Just leave it open, the side parking. It's just, everything is behind. And in the parking garage, you can have 2 indoors, you can park 2 in the back, in the front of the garage, and we have 1 or 2 more in the side. It's like a plenty parking. I don't have to open anything, and that's why I want to make a line.
So you're saying, I think I just counted 6, or how many?
5 or 6 cars, we can park it easy.
5, needs 5, all right. By code, you need for 3 units?
Well, it's 1.5. So
Okay.
That's 4.5, so you have to round it to
Okay.
5.
Well, yeah,
But yes.
we can do 1 for the 3rd floor, 2 for 1st, and 2 for
Okay.
2nd floor.
Yeah.
No more than that.
So again, your testimony is you've got at least 5 off the street, not, with-
Inside the property.
Inside, yeah, not on the street,
No,
okay.
no, inside the property. It's why I
Yeah.
want to do fence and everything on the side, because you can tell other people, oh, you can be parking. 2 months later, you find a car everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's what I want to do, everything right.
Okay, thank you for answering my question. Were there any other questions for Mr. Guerrero? Ms. Vitale has a question for you.
I was looking at the 7, things that need to be addressed. I was reading it that you'd have to have a secondary egress from the 3rd floor and sprinkler system. And I thought you said that if you did the secondary egress, you wouldn't have to do a sprinkler system. Is it the way I'm reading it, or did something change?
Right now, they only got 1 stair in the back. The picture, I see that, right? For the main entry for the building, the property, you got 1 full stairway, go to the 2nd, they come back, return, and they can go to the 3rd one. So I can make it 2 exits. So far I know, right, if I got 2 exits in the code, I don't need sprinkler. So far I know. So I don't have to do the big, to do the sprinkler and everything, if I can make it straight away. And I can make it from the front and then the back too. And then the back is almost ready. And on the front, I only have to build that. With separate doors, separate everything, and ports, separate electrician panel too, only to the 3rd floor. Because 4th and 2nd is all ready.
Okay.
No matter what, should the board approve this, he'll have to submit a building permit, and it won't go anywhere until the building department approves it anyway, so whatever, Mark Collins says is gonna be
Okay.
what he needs. I know he's been working with Mark already, so.
Any other questions for Mr. Guerrero? I think we're all set. You could have a seat.
Yeah, sure.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of the proposed 2 to 3 unit conversion at 37 Crown? So you could have a seat, sir. Was there anybody else to speak in favor? Anybody with questions, concerns, opposition? Hi, ma'am, if you'd like to come to the microphone and give us your name and address and let us know what's on your mind. Hi, good evening.
Sorry. My name is Melanie Kirkland, and I work for 41 Crown Street, Greenwood Press.
Okay,
So
I'm sorry, was it
next door.
Marlene Kirkland?
No, Melanie, sorry.
Melanie, all right. I just want to make sure we get that right. Kirkland,
Kirkland.
K-I-R-K-L-A-N-D?
Kirkland.
Thank you, Ms. Kirkland. And so you work for Greener?
I work for Greenwood Press, which is, if you're facing their house, we're to the left.
Left.
And we're here because I'm on behalf of the owner of the company, Jerry Latondra. And we tried to reach out to them just to address concerns on parking, because that is our big concern, because Coburn Ave, which is between their house and our building, is a very narrow street. And I've seen in the past year, which I've worked for this company almost 20 years, and in the past year I've seen trucks struggling to back up between the 2 buildings. And I think a lot of it has to do with the vehicles that have been parked there on the side, which he's saying will not hopefully be the case if he puts a fence around it.
Right.
So our main concern really is just the parking, and we've done a lot of renovations to our building because it's, it's almost a 200-year-old building, and it would be nice to have somebody come in and do a little bit of maintenance to that house as well.
Yeah.
But again, we just recently had, and I don't know if it was somebody moving out or somebody doing work there, they actually hit our building.
Wow.
So that's a concern, and we have a gas line right outside on that corner as well, which is a huge concern of ours that doesn't get hit, so.
All right. Thank you, Is there any questions? Mr. Boucher has a question for you.
So I just want to understand, when you said the truck was struggling, were there cars parked on the street? Or,
It's been both. I think it's mostly, there's not a lot of room for these big tractor trailers to back up down this street for the business back there, but I think it was the cars on the side that are on Coburn, they were parking on the side of the house.
Okay.
So it's making it difficult for them to,
all right, we'll get some feedback from Mr. Falk, but, unless there's signs there for no parking, I think it's a public street, right, which people can
Yeah.
park on.
Yeah, technically, cars aren't supposed to be having part of their vehicle into the public right-of-way or the public street, the pavement, but
So there's no parking on that street?
not on the street, no.
Not on that particular street?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, I didn't know if there was no parking. Do you know if there's no parking?
I've
know,
never
I
been down
don't
the
know
street.
if
It's a
there's-
short, little, narrow, dead-end street. It's only,
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I guess I didn't know what restrictions were, if there was a restriction on a side street. The only point I'm making is obviously there's parking on Crown Street, right?
yeah.
So what makes the street any different? I know it's narrow, but I also know there's an existing business that uses that street to get to their loading dock, right? And I'm familiar with the area. So I just was wondering if there was anything, and not that that's gonna be, that may not be an issue with this, or may or may not be an issue, but this owner may look at things a little differently than the previous owner, but I was just trying to understand what the
As
guidelines
far as I
are.
know, there's no parking, like overnight. During the day, people
Well,
do park on streets.
Well, I guess that's what I'm
You
saying.
control that.
Yeah,
You can park in most all streets during the day.
Okay.
Sometimes there might be a sign that says you can't park on one side or the other, but
So I guess the point is, that that's why I was trying to understand if there was anything special in this neighborhood or there, but it appears like during the day, in the city of Nashua, you can park on the side of the street unless it's marked otherwise. There's just no overnight parking. So when you said that you're having trouble going on the street, and I can understand that and empathize with your business and building owner, I don't know if, and again, this may not even come up, but we may not be able to prevent any parking if they're legally parked on the street. You follow what I'm saying?
So if he puts a fence up, you're saying that they could still be parking on that street, like,
If-
so they're not on the property, which they've been doing, they'd be
Right,
parked.
So he has to ensure that the fence is on his property, right? And if the rest of it's streets, public right-of-way, and it's a street, it's an approved street in the city of Nashua, then I believe, unless it's marked, if I'm interpreting this right, that anybody can park on the street. So I would suggest to you in the future that if you would have an issue, that's something they could bring to the ward alderman to see if they could restrict parking on one side of the street or restrict parking on the street. And again, that would just be something that you could do aside. We don't have purview over that, but it's just a suggestion. And I'm not doing that to make the owner here's time difficult. I think it may sound like maybe he's a little bit more wanting to clean it up and,
Right.
And work with it. But again, this could be somebody parking there that has nothing to do with that particular residence or your business. It could be somebody who just parks there and walks a half
Right.
a block away.
May I ask a question?
Yep, sure.
Just in you saying that, I just find it interesting because that is such a narrow way that if someone just chose to park their car there, and it's not going to really affect our business unless someone hits it, but for the businesses behind it, if there's a tractor trailer trying to back up, what happens at that point? Just out of curiosity, what happens? They can't deliver their.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately, that's what it is. And again, there's a section behind the East Hall Street Fire Station. There's a neighborhood that's really tight in there. And I know that they have some restrictions in there so that fire trucks get in there, because a fire truck with parking on one side would have a hard time negotiating just getting into that little neighborhood. So, being familiar with this area, I know what the challenges are right over there. So that's just a suggestion I would make as an aside to all this, because it's a concern of your business owner of that property.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Any other questions for Ms. Kirkland? I think we're all set. You could have a seat.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Was there anybody else with questions, concerns, or opposition about the 39 Crown Street, I'm sorry? Mr. Guerrero, if you could come back to the microphone and, so you've heard the business next door, their concerns about parking. I'm not sure if it changes your application. I'm just reiterating what you're saying. Your proposal is to put a fence along there and that your tenants would park off the street.
Inside. Yeah, I saw that. I saw a couple trailers behind, make it hard time to get it. But like I say, we just owned it like a month ago. And we just move it, I move everybody to leave it alone, I mean, the house alone, because I want to
Okay.
renew everything.
Yeah.
And like I say, soon I buy the house, I saw 2 or 3 cars there, junk car. Actually, they owned it before. They rented a small garage to like a mechanic or something. They parking like all many cars there.
Yep.
And I know what the lady say, everybody parking the side, so it's what I propose. I want to put a fence on the side,
Okay.
you know, everybody parking inside, 4 or 5 cars in my property, to make a trailer open it, because we have a business, storage business behind. And they go reverse all the time. So I know it's a little hard, but if I put the fence, and there's no sign for no parking and anything like that, probably, I don't know, in the future, the city can put something in the side. And the front is normally, right? I mean, they
Yeah.
can park it.
You park.
Not in the night, but in the day.
Yeah.
But on the side, I know it's a small road. I don't know, maybe in the future they can put it, the city hall. I mean, they can put a sign or something. And
Well,
try
I
to-
just, it's not our purview, it's not really specific to this case.
No,
I
Right.
think what Mr. Boucher was saying is very valid, that nobody associated with your property could park there, but it
Right.
might be in your, your business neighbor's interest to petition the Ward 7 alderman, and,
Right.
especially, I'm just saying, if there were to be consideration of putting a no parking sign on the street, one point is, your testimony here is that that's okay for you, because you've got enough off-street
Yeah, I mean,
parking
I
for
can
your
work,
tenants.
I can
Yeah.
work in together, I mean.
But
I
that's not,
open it to hearing.
that's not really before us tonight, but it's just come up here in
I
discussion.
can work in together, I mean, it's all neighbors, I got neighbors on the side, neighbor behind, neighbor in the front, so we have to work in together.
Yep. All right, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Guerrero? I think we're all set. You can have a seat.
Thank
Ms. Kirkland, you're free to come back to the mic if you wanted to speak, or maybe perhaps you're okay to rest with what you've said already?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so I'm just going to say, because the mic didn't pick that up, but Ms. Kirkland is going to rest with her testimony. So with that, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. And thoughts on the request to convert the two-family to a three-family? Who would like to jump in first? Ms. McKay?
Well, okay. It doesn't seem out of character. It doesn't seem to be an unreasonable request. There was a permit issued 2005, 2006. So there was the thought of doing it. He's willing to put up egress, the two that are needed. He's willing to work with Mr. Collins so that he is responsive to all of the requests that were submitted to him in writing. And the parking was the only issue, and that's something that, within his purview, he can accomplish for his tenants. However, parking on that street is outside of his purview, so he couldn't do anything about that. And it probably would behoove somebody on that street to reach out to the Ward 7 alderman and request that there either be no parking on that street or only parking on one side, however they do it, but to at least have somebody to look at it. So, in my humble opinion, I can find support for this.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I concur. I think nothing substantially or materially really has changed in the 11 years since it was previously approved. I think there's sufficient, kind of requirements that have to be met by the building department that'll take care of all the code issues. And again, I think the parking is satisfied as what's required by the code for the off-street parking. So I think we're good.
Ms. Vitale?
I would agree. It looks like anything that really I would voice my concern about is going to be addressed by the building department. So,
All
as I said,
right.
I'm good with the special exception.
And for me, I'll jump in and say the only concern I had with this was the parking, but I think Mr. Guerrero's testimony that and I believe there is enough off-site parking, and I hope that he controls it as he says he would. I have every confidence that he will, and I think that even though this 2 to 3 family is a more intense use, a 3 is more intense than a 2, I think overall there'll be an improvement here. That's what I'm hoping for, and that's why I find support for it. Mr. Boucher?
I find support also for all the reasons spoken to, and it's interesting that 11 years ago, one of the special conditions was that suitable parking be prepared and maintained. So I think, again, same concern being addressed. I think there's evidence of that. And again, a very unique neighborhood, and again, Director Butter is also a very large piece of rental property, so I think it fits in just fine with the neighborhood.
Can I ask you to make a motion?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion to approve the special exception for 5 State Service Corporation. Applicant is Rick Guerrero, 39 Crown Street, requesting special exception to convert an existing 2-family dwelling into a 3-family dwelling. This was previously approved by the ZBA on April 26 of 2005. We find that it is listed in the table of uses. I will say that this is in the GI zone, code sections 190-119, section A, subsection 4. So we find that it is listed in the table of uses. It will not create any undue traffic congestion or impair pedestrian safety. It will not overload public water drainage or sewer or municipal system. Special regulations are fulfilled, and it will not impair the integrity or be out of character with the neighborhood or be detrimental to the health, morals, or welfare of the residents. With that, I make a motion to approve the special exception.
And that motion is seconded by Mr. Shaw. Any discussion on Mr. Boucher's motion of approval? Seeing none, a show of hands in favor. So that's unanimous, so that is approved, Mr. Guerrero. Remember, keep in mind that 30-day window of appeal, and, you know, it never hurts to reach out to your neighbors, and it sounds like you're both trying to pull in the right direction, and good luck on your property rehab there. All right, and with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 2. Are we good to keep going? All right, we'll keep moving right along here. Open the public hearing on case number 3. The owner is Rudy O'Valley. The address is 1 Wasson Avenue. The request is a variance for minimum open space. 50% is required in the RA zone. 42% is proposed, and that 42 is because of the construction of a 24-foot 8-inch by 22-foot 7-inch open deck on the southern side of the lot. Hi, good evening.
Hi, my name is Rudy O'Valley. I live in 1 Wasson Avenue, Nashua, New Hampshire. I just requesting a variance to keep the side of my deck in one of my side and 1 corner of my lot of my property.
Okay, so there was a shed there before, is that right?
Yeah, there was a shed before.
Okay, and that you took down and you
Yes,
built.
correct.
Okay. And also, when I took a look at your property, I see like there's maybe some other structures, a little tent thing. Is that going to stay up in the front yard, or is that going to be part of the?
No, that's temporarily.
Just a temporary
Yeah.
thing? Okay. All right.
That's kind of canopy.
Canopy, all right. And, all right, well, let's see, is that it? You good with your testimony there?
Yes.
Okay. Let me just open it up here and see if there's any questions that the board may have. No, none at all. Okay, great. I'm just reviewing your application here. Okay, I'm just going to kind of wrap up your presentation with what you've said in statement number 5 is your belief that this deck is reasonable and it's not going to impact any of your neighbors' property values, or you think if anything it'll help up the property?
No at all.
Okay. All right, well, let's leave it at that then. We don't have any questions? All right, you could have a seat and we'll see if there's any what comes up. Is there anybody else? You
Thank
could have
you.
a seat. Thank you, Mr. O'Valley. Is there anybody else who's here to speak in support of this deck at 1 Wasson Avenue? Is there anybody with questions or concerns, opposition to the deck at 1 Wasson Avenue? No opposition, questions, or concerns? That was quick. I'll close the public meeting. I'm sorry, the public hearing, and open the public meeting. Thoughts, Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I think it's one of these cases where the lot is obviously very small to begin with. I think the fact that it's basically this removal of the shed, replacement with a deck, in some ways, even though I know by calculation it still counts, if anything, it seems that there might be almost technically slightly better kind of open space, more opportunity for drainage, those kind of things. But I think generally considering, Yeah, there's really no place to go with this kind of a deck, really anywhere else on the property, so I think it's reasonable.
All right, thank you. Ms. Vitale?
Yeah, I 100% agree to, you know, to have some outdoor space that's usable on a property like this is kind of tough. And I think there's no other, you know, feasible opportunity to achieve it other than doing something like this.
All right, Mr. Boucher?
I would support the application also.
All right, Ms. McKay?
I concur, I would support it. In fact, it probably is going to give them, as Mr. Shaw clearly stated, more ability to use their property. And it would probably be an advantage to the neighborhood rather than a disadvantage, so I can support this.
All right, Mr. Shaw?
I mean, the other thing is, I should have stated this also, is basically, that's the only part of the property that's basically not frontage, you know, with it being a corner lot especially, that's the only place this can even really be considered, so.
Yeah. On that note, on my site walk, I mean, I'm looking at the requests, you know, 24 and change and 22 and change, and I'm thinking, it seems like a monster deck, but you have to look hard to find it, because it is tucked in the back, and it's you know, it is an open deck, so it's not that high, so I guess I was anticipating seeing something very obtrusive, but it was not very visible at all from the street, which was a pleasant surprise for me, from what I saw. I can support it also. Anybody like to make a motion? Mr. Shaw?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance request on behalf of owner Rudy Ovale at 1 Wasson Avenue. The request is for variance for minimum open space where 50% is required. 42% is proposed to construct a 24-foot 8-inch by 22-foot 7-inch open deck on the southern side of the lot, and this is in the RA zone. The variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property. Given the special conditions of the property, this is a corner lot, and this is really the only place that's available for the placement of this deck. There previously was a shed in this part of the property as well, so there's really no other feasible way for the applicant to pursue other than this area variance. It's within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. There's no indication of any adverse effects on surrounding parcel property values, and the applicant believes it will only benefit property values. It's not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice will be served. And again, I move to approve this variance request.
Ms. Vitale's hand was right in the air for a second to Mr. Shaw's motion. Is there any discussion on Mr. Shaw's motion to approve? Showing none, a show of hands in favor. So that's 5-0. So, Mr. Ovale, your deck is approved, and we wish you good luck and hope you enjoy it. And with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 3. Good to keep going?
No?
No. I think we're going to take a 5-minute recess here, folks, 5 minutes, and then we'll be back in action.
I have to finish writing, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine, we can,
Take a 5-minute.
I'll take the break, but I just want to finish writing this.
Thank you.
anticipating.
All right.
Well done, sir.
Are we ready to get going, you think? All right, hi, folks. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If we could get going here, I'd like to open the public hearing on case number 4. Just get my notes organized here. Case number 4. The owners are Michael and Julian Atkins. The applicant is John Reed, KRD Builders. The address is 1086 West Hollis Street. The request is a use variance to construct a child daycare facility on a vacant lot. This is Ward 5 in the R30 zone. Hi, who is here to present the application tonight? Hi, if you could come to the microphone and give us your name and address and walk us through the application.
My name is John Reed, and my address is 454 Main Street in New London, New Hampshire. I work for KRD Builders.
Hi, if we could have a silence there, please. Thanks. Go ahead.
I work for KRD Builders out of Amherst. We're located at 106 Chestnut Hill Road. I represent Michael and Julianne Atkins because they are the current property owners. I also represent Joyce Goodwin, who is the owner of Granite Start Early Learning Center here in Nashua. Joyce has put an offer in on the property, and the offer is contingent on our ability to successfully gain a variance to move her business to this property. It is zoned R30, and that's why we're here. So what we're proposing on the property is to place an approximately 12,000 square foot building, single story, wood frame structured with a shingled roof, a regular gabled roof. All of the mechanicals and whatnot would be on inside the trusses. There'll be attic trusses, so none of it would protrude. The building is, I don't know how to describe that over a microphone, but it's a modified U shape.
I think we have a picture of
Okay,
it
so you
in
have
the
that, yeah.
application, and I'll just hold it up. It might be hard for you to see
Yes,
from
and
there.
my drawing is probably a little bit bigger. It's not to scale, so it's not going to look that big on the lot, but I wanted to be able to show you the design that we're going for. The parking, the driveway and whatnot would be between the building and the road. I don't know if you're familiar with the lot, but the lot has a natural bowl shape to it. In the back of it, there's a berm as well as a row of trees. All of that will stay to protect not only the abutters, but also to protect the school. As I said, the variance gives us the ability to go forward. Without the variance, we're more than likely going to back out of the sale of the piece of property. It's a perfect location for us. It's 3 miles from where the business is currently located, which allows the business to maintain most of their current clientele, puts it on a road that has pretty decent traffic, but it faces not the residential side, it faces the business road. There are businesses on the opposite side of the street that you can see from where this driveway would be. And I guess that's about it.
All right, maybe I'll lead off with a few questions, if you don't mind. What quantity of children is this facility targeted to you
I
have?
don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it is in the application.
Oh, okay, I must have missed that.
Bear with me here, I guess it's not.
Saying 24 employees?
Yeah, that's staff. May I ask a question? Joyce is here with me. the
Sure,
owner.
she could, if she'd like to come and just, she could give us her name and address for the record, and maybe she could answer the question.
Joyce Goodwin, my address is 4 Marshmallow Path in Hudson. I run Granite Star Early Learning Center at 4 Merritt Parkway in Nashua.
Hi, I was curious how many children this facility is intended to have there.
Approximately 145.
145, all right.
That would be a grand total, but with the way we run our programs, not every child is there every day. Right now, we have 120 children at our current facility with an average daily of 85 to 95. So total enrollment would be 145. A daily count would probably be about 120.
Okay. And how long, you're at Merritt Parkway now is where you're, have you outgrown that? Is that what you're doing? You're looking for a larger space, or?
Yes, right now we're in an 8,000 square foot building. We run programs for a variety of children and families. We take children with disabilities as well as DCYF and state tuition, so our program has grown to a point where we really need to add more space to accommodate more children.
I see. And then, when Mr. Reed was talking about like this layout of the building, I guess I'm figuring it's like, is there gonna be like a playground out back or something? It almost looks like that's where the, the parking's in the front and maybe the outdoor stuff is in the back? Is
Correct,
that-
there'll be a courtyard playground, and what we're looking for is not a typical playground. I like to go more for natural playgrounds, so it would be all wooden playground that would fit right in with that area.
I see. And then the playground-ish area, how far do you think that might be from the property lines?
That I don't know until we find out where the building's actually gonna sit on there, and again, we can't do any of that until we find
Okay.
out whether we can get the variance or not.
Right. All right, fair enough.
In the, I keep calling it the bowl-shaped area, but the bowl-shaped area in the center is large enough that we can move the building forward a little bit so that we're not gonna have to do anything with the berm that protects the surrounding neighborhood, as well as the tree line. It's a big, open circle, for lack of a better description, and it is depressed. So it is gonna put it down a little bit below the berm, but there is room on the lot to pull the building forward so that we're not impeding on that in any way.
Thank you. I mean, I did myself, most of us do all site walks, but we don't walk on private property, so I didn't notice that there was, kind of a bowl, but, you're mentioning that, and the application mentioned that. Is the drainage there, you have good drainage, that there's no issues with that?
I don't know that particular property at all, and I understand their real estate agent is here, but I think it used to be a sand pit or a dirt pit at some point, so it's been dug out.
Yeah.
And then naturally filled back in.
Yeah.
As you come in off of West Hollis Street, you actually walk up a rise, and when you clear the top of the rise, you actually go back down to the berm. That would come out so that the natural flow of rainwater or whatever would come away from the building. It wouldn't pool in the center.
Mm-hmm. All right, and I'll keep going if you don't mind, while I have the microphone here. I'm familiar with J-Don's, nearby across the street. What other businesses are there nearby?
There's a gas station sort of diagonally across the street. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. That would be the only one
Okay,
that I know by sight.
storage place, storage place.
Yeah, there is a storage place on the opposite side of the road as well.
There's a thought what's that?
T-tower as well, in the back of that.
You mean a cell tower?
Yeah.
Telecommunications tower, okay. Well, I guess another thought I had is, it would, I guess I was a little bit concerned, while on one hand, you could say you can make an argument it's a good location for the business, because it's a well-traveled road. I think the speed limit there is 40, but I didn't quite remember. I used to live right down the street for 5 years, but that was a while ago. But I would say that I'm feeling the traffic is pretty heavy at the rush hours, and it might be a detriment to it might be a problem or a challenge, especially making a left-hand turn. I didn't know if you could speak to me about that general thought.
There, obviously on West Hollis Street, coming from that end, there's a lot of traffic, especially in the morning and the evening. That's typically when children are coming to the school. They get dropped off in the morning, they get picked up in the afternoon. We have not done any traffic studies yet. Again, without the variance, we've been reluctant to put a lot of money into
Sure.
that portion of it, which we see as part of which would be addressed through the planning portion of it, as far as traffic flow, that kind of thing. There is a light down the road a little ways, but I think it's far enough, so I think you're right, that you could easily get up to 35 or 40 miles an hour by the time you got to the property coming from the westerly side.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you for helping me out with my questions. Let me ask, are there other folks with questions here? Mr. Shaw?
Just, there's also the nature of this lot is kind of this odd, kind of funky, almost T shape or whatever. There's the part of it that extends behind, I think it's behind 1096 and 1100 West Hollis Street. Any plans for doing anything with that part of the property?
There's really not a lot that portion can become. It seemed to be as good a place as any for the septic area to go, over to that side of the property. That's the part that sort of abuts that landlocked little wedge of land there. It doesn't really serve a purpose as far as the school is concerned, other than allowing us a place that we can put our infrastructure. So we wouldn't put parking or anything like that over in that area.
And you mentioned that landlocked lot, that we have one communication that is in support of that, but they also note that they're interested in, if this gets approved, of having vehicular and utility access. Has that been considered, entertained?
We've not heard it from anyone. We did make an offer on that property, and it was declined. We would not consider giving any kind of an easement for access to that particular piece of property.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that. Anybody else have questions? I think we're all set. I guess I did have one other thing. In your application, I hear loud and clear, you know, you've got this good business, and certainly I think I appreciate the business you're in, and with the, you know, the handicapped kids and stuff, and you're looking to expand, and you want to stay close by, but one thing that I struggle with is that's a hardship you have with a growing business, but I'm wondering, is that really a hardship on this parcel of land, though? It's almost like your situation is you want to grow. It's a good place to be. You need to grow, but when I look at the criteria that I'm supposed to judge by, it's you know, you look at this parcel of land, 1086 Hollis Street, and I'm saying to myself, I'm not sure if I'm finding hardship from an R30 zoning on it point of view. It certainly would be of great value to you because you could expand a school, your school, but I'm not sure if I'm finding the hardship in an R30, but that's just me. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that, you know, about this particular parcel of land. You know, is it particularly hard to develop as an R30 lot? Have you?
Well, again, it's not big enough where you could do a development.
Mm-hmm.
You might be able to put in a single multifamily
Mm-hmm.
structure of some sort in order to make it pay for itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the kind of lot that you're gonna put a very large house on. It's a big lot in that area. But
Yep.
it's not the kind of lot that you're gonna put an $800 or $900 million house on.
Yeah.
To take advantage of the lot, which is not gonna support that.
Yeah.
The other problem you run into is and I would think that some of the abutters could probably speak to the traffic coming out of there. If we would have put a multifamily building in there where you're gonna have access at all hours, it's different than the school, which is gonna be basically 7 to 6,
Mm-hmm.
and not on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
So it's your typical business. So from a developing it standpoint, it's not big enough to do a true development, but
Mhm.
yet it's not small enough, doesn't lend itself easily to do a single-family home either.
Okay.
Just from a cost standpoint.
All right.
It's an expensive lot for a single-family home in that area.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you for that. I appreciate that testimony. Just one more chance. Any other questions here? All right, and as Mr. Shaw noted, there was a letter in support from that landlocked parcel, but it was also requesting to provide vehicle and utility access, which you say there's no interest in doing, but anyway, we have that letter that's read into the file. So you could have a seat, and we'll see what comes up.
All right, thank you.
Is there anybody else to speak in favor of the proposed use variance at 1086 Hollis Street? Is there anyone with questions, concerns, or opposition? I see a hand in the back, a couple of hands. Maybe, sir, in the back, if you'd like to come up. And who else would be speaking tonight? I see a fellow in a blue shirt, 2, 3. So I see a total of 4 hands in the air. All right. Again, if you could give us your name and address and let us know what's on your mind.
My name is Peter Massini, spelled Maccini.
Thank you, Mr.
I am
Massini.
a butter and reside at 1080 West Hollis Street, immediately across from the J. Don gas station and convenience store, which you are familiar with. I've been living in Nashville since 1997, and specifically off of West Hollis Street at a previous apartment off of Dogwood, and now my permanent resident, which I hope to retire at 1080 West Hollis Street. With that in mind, I chose my residential dwelling in a place where I had a lot of elbow room, i.e. in excess of 1 acre. The lots out towards West Hollis Street are of septic and well designed, as city services for sewer are not yet there. When the dump also on West Hollis Street was proposed to buy up some residences there, the mayor asked that residential zoning along West Hollis Street keep in character of residential zoning. With each additional inconvenience of traffic, as you mentioned, there's quite the traffic count on West Hollis Street. I have a lot of turning vehicles that run up on my mailbox and clip it from time to time, just trying to get into J-Dons, because there's an impetus to get to and from work without delay. We have a lot of through traffic into Massachusetts, Pepperell, Groton, etc., not to mention Hollis and Brookline. So I can see why maybe a daycare would be beneficial for some folks to drop off their kids and pick them up on the way from home. This disclosed 120 students to 145 students with additional 24 employees and staff. It could be anticipated that literally 1 to 200 easily left-hand turns could be right in front of my house with traffic jacked up onto J-Dons, et cetera. I don't think that this proposal would be in the keeping of a residential neighborhood. I believe in your own zoning ordinances and zoning laws. It states for residential R30 zoning that it should be to protect residents and residential keeping. Okay, we specifically have zones for light business and heavy business where, for example, on Northeastern Boulevard, there's a daycare there called the Launching Pad. So it's not that we don't have daycares in Nashville. I don't think, however, in front of my address, my wife, Dalila, who's here present today, she's a stay-at-home housewife, and she takes care of my every needs in a traditional standpoint, as well as hers, and we're active in the community with supporting our church, et cetera. When I look at what might be permissible as a secondary use, I'm not against people having a dozen kids at their daycare if they run it out of their own home. We have other people who have shingle held. One lady's a nice seamstress on West Hollis Street. The aforementioned storage facility is about 2 or 3 miles down the road to the east. So there are no businesses outside of J-Don's. J-Don's, for those people not familiar, started out as a little farm stand back in the day, and the owners still have a house present behind J-Don's. So, you know, if you're a resident there and you want to hang up your shingle and help pay for your city taxes or what have you, I'm not opposed to that. But establishing a business in a residential area, I think it's going to be contrary to the public interest, contrary to the zoning, diminish my property value especially, and you know, increase the safety risks that are on West Hollis Street, particularly in front of my residence. I'm not in favor of it, and I hope other abutters and residents in West Hollis Street zoning districts are not in favor of it either. I thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you. Are there any
Do you have any questions of me?
questions? I guess I have one, Mr. Mancini, and that is, if, obviously this lot's vacant, if it were to be developed as intended, which is R30, I'm guessing there could be perhaps 4 or 5 houses on it if it's about 4 acres. Let me
There
just-
there is a potential, I imagine, for it to be used for its intended purpose. My property, however, I communicated to the owner of 1086 West Hollis Street that I dispute his lot lines and boundaries, and that possibly a portion of 0.4 acres of previous owner to me, I assume my bank foreclosure on my property. It was a bank foreclosure, okay? And previously, my property consisted of 4 acres. That 4 acres was subdivided, and so no matter what the property owner does, eventually he may or may not come into a dialogue or discussion with me to be amicable as to resolving the lot line difference. I've put that out there many times to a realtor he engaged in the past, also the realtor that's here now. But I'm talking to you specifically that I don't concur with a business use in the R30 zone, specifically that which I reside in.
Sure.
Also, my neighbor two doors down, Flavio Campos, who lives at, I believe it's 1076 West Hollis Street. He could not be here tonight and would also, by proxy, if you will, voice his concerns not to have that done as well. So maybe I'll have more people speak to that. I don't think it's in the spirit of the ordinance. I appreciate people have children that they need to pick up and drop off, but I don't feel that it should be on this street abutting my property.
All right, thank you, Mr. Messini. Again, any questions? I think we're all set. You could have a seat.
Thank you for your time.
Sir, if your hand was also up, if you could come on up and give us your name and address. And actually, while you're walking to the mic, we do have a letter here dated August 22nd. It's about a page and a half. I'm not going to read it into the record. I'll just assume that we've all read it. I know I have. And while you're starting to give your testimony, I'll just give this copy to, or maybe Mr. Falk could hand it to the applicant just so they could see it. So again, if you want to take it away, sir, if you could give us your name and address.
My name is Don Tebow. I live at 10 Caitlin Circle, excuse me, which is a direct abutter to this piece of property. I guess I'd like to reiterate the last speaker said in part that the reason I chose that property and that the neighborhood to live in is because we all have an acre. We have room, you know what I mean? It feels more like Hollis. It doesn't feel like part of Nashua. So that's why we specifically moved there, okay? So we actually have a little bit of room. That piece of property is able to be developed with homes. There's one piece that will get landlocked, and I think it's in the rules that you can't do that, which is also another concern of mine. Traffic would be a major concern. I know what they had mentioned when the children get dropped off in the morning and the afternoon. You know, if there was 4 houses in there, how many cars are you gonna get? Maybe 8 a day going in and out? And then you're talking, you know, over 100 going in and out. And then when you have people leaving J-Dons, if they're taking a right, then you have those other cars right there. Everything's gonna be bottlenecked right there, right in front. It's all together. You already have the traffic going by, not even taking into consideration the people that are leaving. J-Dons are coming in. They're gonna be in the same exact area. But I guess my major concern is because it's R30, I think if we allow ourselves to say, yes, a business can go in there, give a variance, then the next piece of property down the road can say, well, they allowed it there, so I should be able to have it here. So then that takes away the nice area that we have up there with these bigger house lots that a lot of people flock to because it feels so nice. It's more rural. You're 10 minutes away from downtown, but you have that area. So I think that's my major concern is changing that. Then it opens the door to allow a lot of other businesses to come in, which I think would definitely affect our property values. Because that's exactly why I bought there, because it was bigger and it's just nice and spread out. So I think that's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tevo. Any questions? I think we're all set. Have a seat. Sir in the blue shirt, I think I saw your hand up. And I think there was a fella there. And was there anybody else besides that fella? Okay, so we have this guy and one more. Hi, good evening.
Hi, my name is Chris Botcher, B-O-T-T-C-H-E-R. I'm speaking on a representative capacity for 1100 West Hollis Street. It is abutted, you noticed in that weird T formation. One of the primary concerns was what that would be used for, and having just heard that it may be used for a septic area, well, you can imagine what the property value impact might be there. Another issue that came up was the traffic lights, the traffic study. One of the worries would be, well, if there is a large enough traffic impact, would they put a light in there? A light there, we feel, would decrease the property values in the general area. A lot of the concerns were already brought up by previous speakers. In the application, the applicant stated that that the proposed use would be in keeping with the continuity of the community, but failed to mention how. How would the essential character of the neighborhood be preserved? There's no statement. But we've heard a lot of statements to the contrary, how we feel putting a 12,000 square foot business back there would impact the community. So that's a large concern. And I think most of the other concerns have been addressed, but we would like to reiterate that it is a residential area, and that was one of the large draws to that area, is the residences. So we'd prefer to keep with that.
Thanks, Mr. Botcher. Any questions? I think we're all set. Thanks for coming tonight. Sir, if you'd like to let us know what's on your mind. Again, if you could give us your name and address for the record. You might want to pull that microphone down a little.
Okay, right. Hi, my name is Earl Nipfer. I live at 1110 West Hollis Street in Nashua. So we purchased our property a year and a half ago. Reason being, we had some family members had to move in and stuff. So we lived in Nashua quite some time. Decided to purchase that, get back into a nice wooded area. And I'm not against change and progress, but I've been an unrestricted builder for the last 25 years in the state of Mass. I built commercial property, residential property. At best, you could get 3 houses in there. 3 houses doesn't equate to 300 trips daily on that road. Again, and if you're coming out of for the people that live by Jadon, when you're coming out of Jadon, if you're taking a right, you already have a hard enough time trying to see around that corner. You're talking about adding a possibility of another 150 cars coming from various directions. One of my main concerns is there's some other parcels around there that if we set a precedence now, again, and I know some of this has been already spoken to, what prevents the next person from saying, you did it once, you did it for me? I know that's happened in some areas where cluster zoning in this state. Once it was opened up, the precedence is there. You can't, unring the bell, as they say. My other concern is we're at the tip of that, the T section you talk about. And I believe I just heard the other gentleman say that that's what they're talking about, putting a septic system up there. Based on the elevation, you'd have to do some type of a pump system. Just the elevation there alone, there's no way you're going to get any type of a static drain. So you're going to have to put some type of pump system. So you're going to be taking the wastewater from there, pumping it up to basically our backyards. That's a major concern of mine, especially with that whole slope in there. And I understand as a builder myself, you're trying to work for your client, get the most bang for your dollar. I do take people's feelings into account, but at the end of the day, it's a business. And I understand what they're trying to do, and they're trying to grow their business. That's great in this economy if you need to grow. But again, I don't think that growing their business should have an adverse effect on my property. And I challenge anyone that's telling me how putting a 12,000 square foot building in with 300 trips a day is not going to adverse my property financially when we have a wooded area. Between the wildlife corridor and everything else, that's just gone now. 12,000 square foot building is going to stop that, along with the parking and everything else. And I know a lot of the stuff that we handle at the planning board, but some of the stuff just from my own land, I mean, I don't see how they get around some of it. Some of the drainage ditches, the water runoff just from that whole slope area around there. They're going to have a massive retention pond in there somewhere, but there's no way to catch it other than going right out into the front of the Jadon. So, and again, I understand those are things to be handled at the board, but I just, ask that you keep all that in mind. That's it.
All right, thanks, Mr. Nipfer. Any questions? All right, one last chance. Was there anybody else to speak in Questions, concerns, or opposition? Seeing none, Mr. Reed, would you?
Excuse me, Mr. Curry,
Oh.
just, I think you had alluded to the correspondence, but you
yeah.
didn't note who it was from. I
Sure.
think just for the record, at least note that.
Actually, I
it's-
got rid of mine. Here it is. So the correspondence that the applicant has had a chance to read was a letter dated August 22nd, 2017, addressed to this board, and it was by Julia L. Esp, 9 Caitlin Circle. And for a variety of reasons here, she has written a letter in opposition. Thank you for clarifying that. So that's on a record. Mr. Reed, would you like to come back and speak just about what we've heard here on opposition?
I'd like to address the gentleman who spoke last.
Sure. If
As
you could
a
address,
fellow-
Mr. Reed, if you could just
Okay.
give the testimony to us,
All
you
right,
know.
well, as a professional builder and a fellow builder, you have to know when to pick your battles.
Mhm.
I've just consulted with Joyce Goodwin, and in light of that, we'd like to, if it's possible, withdraw our request for the variance. In New England, we're all about community, and this is too important to keep these people's neighborhood and community the way it is. We'll find another lot. We'll put the school in a more appropriate place. The big thing here is the traffic, something that, quite frankly, we didn't do due diligence on, and the impact of that traffic. And hearing the recurring theme of what people are saying, I have nothing to come back with that. There's nothing I can do about that, short of putting in a traffic light, and I would agree with the person that mentioned that that's not a good thing, not only for that neighborhood, but also for that section of road. You come from one light, to put another light just because of the school is going to negatively impact traffic flow beyond even people waiting to turn next to J. Don's or even coming from the other direction. So I don't know if we're allowed to do that.
No,
Or if
actually-
you actually have to vote, but we've consulted and we'd like to, at this point, withdraw our request for the variance.
Yeah, but as the applicant, you can withdraw, and it just, the public meeting, which is happening now, just ends, and you've withdrawn the application, and
That's true. They can withdraw right now and walk out. Unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to get your fees back because we already had the public hearing and the notifications and the newspaper ad and all the legal fees have been spent. So you can withdraw and just, the application is just, done.
Right.
So if you're saying your withdrawal, that's fine. I think I speak on behalf of the whole board that we wish you and the school good luck with your continued growth.
We will continue to look in the Nashua area. We'd dearly like to keep it in the western part of Nashua, close to where it is now. There's an appropriate piece of land out there. We just haven't found it yet.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Sure, Ms. McKay would like to say something.
I wrote down what you said so that we keep that when you stated that in New England, we're all about community, and you were sensitive to the best interest of the neighborhood and your neighbors, and I commend you and Joyce. Truly, that's an honorable thing that you just did.
Thank you.
You're quite
It was
welcome.
a long way.
All right, well, good luck with your continued search.
Thank you very much.
All right, and I'll close case number 4, because it is withdrawn. Are we good to keep going? All right. I'd like to open the public hearing on case number 5. The owner is SPSC Associates, LLC, and Harbor Homes. The applicant is Nashua Elks Lodge number 720. The address is 75 to 77 and 85 Northeastern Boulevard, and the request is a variance to place an off-premises sign at the aforementioned lot to direct vehicles to the Nashua Elks Lodge located at 12 Murphy Drive. Hi, good evening. Who's going to be speaking tonight in favor? If you'd like to give us your name and address and walk us through your application.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for your time. My name is John Balch.
Good evening,
I'm a
Mr.
Pastor Delta
Balch.
ruler for Elks Lodge number 720.
And that's B-A-L-C-H?
B-A-L-C-H.
And what's your address?
I reside in Hudson, New Hampshire, at 33 Reflection Drive.
All right, well, welcome. Would you like to walk us through your application?
You want me to present my case? What?
Sure.
Okay.
Or you could, if,
Wait
if,
till-
you know, we do have a written application, if you're good with letting it stand on that. I know we've all read it and such. That's fine, okay, as well.
Well, basically, the primary reason for seeking the variance for the off-premise directional signs is to give our members, and we have members that come from all 50 states as well as Guam and Puerto Rico, and well as our functions of our business down there is a non-profit social club and a rental hall. So by allowing us to put these directional signs, we allow the public who wish to visit our lodge, as well as members that are unfamiliar with Northeastern Boulevard, let alone Murphy Drive. The sign would give them a sense of assurance and alert the driver that he or she is on the right path when they see the Elks directional signs. The new signs will serve as a tool to locate the Elks. Basically what our application is for.
All right. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Balch? I guess I have a question for you, and that is, so one of the two signs you're requesting is like to be situated so that people on Northeastern Boulevard can see it.
Correct.
I guess the question I have is that originally the rather large GM Roth sign was erected to have direction for those units there. And was there any discussion of just having a portion of that sign? Because they have like a couple of different things going on. They have their name, they have a changing cover, and then there's like 4 panels. But, you know, was there any discussion of having Elks incorporated on one of those?
Yes, there has been.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things, the sign would have been relatively small, wouldn't be a directional sign, but the cost of putting a sign was almost like $500 a month. And that was out of our, we don't bring in that kind of funds to pay something like that.
Uh-huh.
You know, they had other prices down to a couple $100s, but they were getting smaller signs and stuff. So that's why we elected to pursue this matter with shrink packaging system and Harbor Homes. Harbor Homes said, yes, you can put the sign there in between the rock, and so that's why we're pursuing this variance.
Okay. And then the other question I have is the other sign, I think it's going to be in the area, is that like where the blood drive sign was today? I mean, the other sign.
The other sign is going to be about 50 feet from shrink packaging back lot, right before the woods line. Okay.
Okay.
That's what, and that'd be a directional sign that say, you can take a left down.
Turn left.
Go into the-
Because I noticed that there's a sign there now with the Elks Lodge on it.
National Elks Lodge, yes. That's a small, we want to put more of a permanent type sign.
Okay. So you're saying that sign's not working or something, or not good enough?
Well, it doesn't get the people down, people don't see the sign, those are only like permanent signs, we wanted something more, those are temporary signs that like,
Well, I think what I was looking at today was, you know, there's a big permanent sign with the different businesses on it.
Right.
And one of those, you know, it says Nashua Elks on it.
correct.
And I think this other sign you're asking for is right near that sign.
Correct, just before that, but it would be on Murphy Drive. When you drive down Murphy Drive,
Mm-hmm.
and we have this problem all the time, people don't see that banner sign or billboard sign, but there's all the different industries in there.
Mm-hmm.
They drive right by it and they continue around. So now we're trying to just give them a little positive direction. Yeah, that would serve as another tool for them to get into the property when they see that.
Okay.
All right, that's right there, that's where the flagpole is, because we're the only ones that have a flagpole.
Okay.
That's how we'll give direction.
The flagpole. All right. I didn't notice that. I usually notice those things. All right. Thank you. I appreciate you helping me out with my questions. Was there anybody else who had questions for Mr. Balch? I think we're all set for the time being. Was there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of this application? Anyone with questions, concerns, or opposition? Oh, we have. Sir, were you gonna, somebody gonna speak? Okay. Great.
My name is Al Savage. I'm a native Nashua man, and my mother was born in Pine Street back in 1887. I've seen the city grow. I moved around. I live in Robinson Road, which is just a very short distance down there on Northeastern Boulevard. But to me, this is a safety factor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've gone by, and I remember going to take my wife down, and I said, this is where the elk's going to be. And I've gone down, and I've missed it.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming from the other side, it's a different thing. So I said, now we've got to look for GM Roth. We've got to keep looking all the time for that. And this sign here is just something, it's an open corner. The sign, if you go up and you see elks. I mean, you got people, like they say, coming from all over the state. Come in, Massachusetts, for different occasions to go on. And I feel this is really a strong safety factor.
Okay.
And I know that the sign is up there. I won't miss it again myself.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mr. Savage. Any questions for Mr. Savage? All right. Was there anybody else who's going to speak? I didn't want to miss anyone. Seeing none, and I think you're all sitting together, so I'll just ask, is there anybody in opposition? All right, no opposition, so I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I think this is a tricky area to get back into, and I think it's just hard to have your bearings there off of Northeastern, and I think especially the way they're located back there, I think this is something that's just going to help everybody out. And whether it's people from out of town or out of the area, whether it's for functions or other Elks members, it's the kind of thing where just I think a couple signs like this will make a big difference and help folks out.
All right, Ms. Vitale?
I 100% agree. I'm down there every week, and I know this area and the road, and I do believe it'll be a benefit to the people that attend functions there.
All right, Mr. Boucher?
I support the application and, also note that it is a very heavily traveled road for commercial use and for people going into the neighborhoods that live there. So sometimes traffic does move along, and I think that, anything else that we can do to help somebody not make a panic turn or miss it would be great.
Ms. McKay?
I completely agree with my fellow board members and everything they had to say. I support it.
All right. I guess I'm a dissenter on this. I feel that the Ross sign could accommodate it, and I see that other directional sign down there. As the Elks already has a sign, but I don't want to make a big case. I'll just leave it at that and say, would somebody like to make a motion? Mr. Shaw?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance request for SPSC Associates, LLC, and Harbor Homes, Inc. The applicant is Nashua Elks Lodge, number 720, and the addresses are 75-77 and 85 Northeastern Boulevard. The request is for variance to place the off-premises sign at the aforementioned lots to direct vehicles to Nashua Elks Lodge located at 12 Murphy Drive, and this is in the PI zone. The variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property. Primarily, this is to help aid folks in finding the Elks Lodge from their way on Northeastern Boulevard, and there's no feasible means otherwise for the applicant to pursue. So within the spirit and intent of the ordinance, there's no adverse effect on property values. It's not contrary to public interest, and in fact, I believe it will serve the public interest and substantial justice will be served. And again, I move to approve this variance.
Motion on the table to approve, seconded by Mr. Boucher. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, a show of hands in favor of the motion to approve is 4, and opposed is myself. That carries, so your request is approved tonight, and the board wishes you good luck with your lodge. All right. And with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 5. I don't think we had any minutes.
No, I don't think there were any minutes.
There were no minutes. We do have an agenda, a long agenda.
Yeah.
So we'll take a look here for regional impact. I guess a question for Mr. Falk is 17 Gregg Road, is that on the border?
That does border Massachusetts, so we would notify them. It actually abuts property that they own. It's all part of the Dunstable Land Trust, which the Aleutian Farm is connected with, and associated with, so it's all their property anyway.
So you'll be notifying
Yeah, we'll
them?
notify the town.
Okay. Does anybody see any regional impact? Mr. Boucher is a no. Mr. Shaw is a no. Ms. Vitale is a no. I'm a no. Jack Courier is a no. And Ms. McKay is a no. So we find no regional impact. Just a question is, how many folks think they might be here next, for this meeting? Does anybody know they're not going to be here?
I will not.
You will not be.
And I'm going to be in France.
France, oh, all right. I did contact the mayor's office to try to see if we could get those other 2 new members here. Hopefully, that'll happen. It sounds like with you 2 going to be gone, that'll be pretty key, because there's only going to be 3.
I think Steve is out as well.
I think he said he was going to be out.
I thought he said,
Thought
well,
the
I was
next-
at the next.
Thought he said the next 2 meetings,
meeting, so-
meaning this one and that one.
Next one, so
Yeah,
we'll
the
just have
country on
3.
one of them, I thought.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I don't
we'll
remember,
just have
but I just
3
know
and maybe
his.
a new one if.
Yeah. So I'll keep pursuing that to see if we can get the 2 new folks here.
Although if they have not been approved by the Board of Aldermen yet, they didn't, they don't meet on the 4th Tuesday in August or July. So there would, if they weren't
They're
already
approved.
approved, they
Yeah, they
wouldn't
are.
be until our next meeting.
Their names are listed.
Yeah, Mr. Boucher
On
pointed
here.
out that they were approved, and I double-checked, and
Okay.
they are, yeah.
Maybe we'll try to contact them and see if they can come.
Yeah.
Also, Roger just handed this to me today. I think I put one in front of everybody. It's one of the typical municipal law lecture series. There's one in Gorham and one in Concord coming in September and October. Just FYI. I believe the city would pay as well if you guys want to go to it.
All right, is there any other business before the board? If not, I make a motion to adjourn, seconded by Mr. Shaw, all in favor? And we are adjourned at 8:46 PM.